The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I've changed for the better this time. I thought I would never be fine. I strive just to
Dreaming of a life in Portugal? Or maybe you're just curious about what it would be like to move here. My family and I began planning for our move way back in 2020. It took 2 more years to make it happen, and it has been quite an adventure. Before you pack your bags, listen in to hear the real stories of those who've already taken the leap. Every other Wednesday, we dive deep into the experiences of individuals and families who chose to make Portugal their home. Discover their motivations, the challenges they faced, and the unexpected joys they encountered along the way. We'll explore their preparation strategies, navigating bureaucracy, and the realities of building a new life in a foreign land. Whether you're seriously considering a move or simply curious about life in Portugal, these authentic accounts will offer invaluable insights and help you decide if this sun-drenched country is someplace you want to relocate to, or maybe just visit on vacation. Welcome to Mover, Portugal Unpacked.
I ain't going back, I'm not falling. I'll push all my chips and call all in. I'll bet on myself, you keep stalling.
Have you ever dreamt of trading your everyday life for the sun-drenched shores of Portugal? The charming cobblestone streets, the delicious pastel de nata, the promise of a slower pace of life. It's easy to get swept away by these idyllic images. But what's the real story behind moving to Portugal? That's what we're exploring on this podcast, Mover, Portugal Unpacked. I'm your host, Melissa Lefort, and on this podcast, we're going beyond the picture-perfect postcards and the too good to be true YouTube videos to talk with the people who have actually made the leap. Expats and immigrants from all walks of life, from digital nomads to retirees, will share their unfiltered experiences, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. You'll hear about the practicalities like navigating the visa process, finding housing, understanding the healthcare system from the interviews. And maybe more importantly, we'll explore the cultural nuances, the unexpected challenges, and the moments of pure magic that come with building a new life here. Mover Portugal Unpacked is about real people, real stories, and the real Portugal. Whether you're seriously considering a move, just dreaming of one, or simply curious about this fascinating country, join us as we unpack the realities of life in Portugal. And it's super helpful as I create content for this project that you subscribe to Mover Portugal Unpacked wherever you get your podcasts and join the conversation. New episodes every other Wednesday. So I want to start out by interviewing myself. So I have a list of interview questions that I use for everyone that comes on the podcast, but I thought I'd do my own first. And I thought I would start out with a little extra in this episode, like why I decided to start this podcast. So right now, I am having it, and I should tell you the date. The date is February 8th, 2025. And I would say daily, I am getting questions from especially Americans about what they need to do to move to Portugal. Actually, sometimes they want to know about moving to other countries as well, but Portugal is really the only one that I have any experience with. So I feel like there's a lot of false information out there about moving to Portugal, but also Spain. And the reality is any country that is not your home country that you want to move to, it's going to be challenging. But there are a bunch of YouTube videos and TikToks and blogs. Yeah, just a lot of information out there that makes it look like this is a dream come true. And I will start out of the gate by saying that I love being in Portugal. This has been a very good move for me and my family. However, it was not easy. And a lot of the information that's out there around moving here is sugar coated, for lack of a better word. So I wanted to create a space where people actually told their story so that listeners who were considering this or knew someone who was considering it could actually hear from other people who had done it. So, what you can expect in each podcast episode is to hear somebody's story from start to finish, what they did to prepare before they moved, and then how they got here, what they found the experience like, the actual move, and then what they found the experience like once they actually lived here for a while. And so we'll talk about the good stuff and the bad stuff. It's not about bashing the United States of America, nor is it about bashing Portugal. It's just about giving a really realistic view of what you can expect. So we moved, let me go back. My family and I visited Portugal for the first time in 2019. We came in December and we loved it. It was a combination of my husband's home culture, which is Brazil, and ironically, a little bit of American culture. So we had never experienced both of our cultures in another area kind of woven together, and we were very enchanted with our experience. We went home, got home like January something, and we were living in the Seattle area at the time. Got hit by a big snowstorm, finally got back into school. I was a former US school teacher, and it's my husband and I and our daughter. We all got back to work and school sometime in February. And in March, we had COVID-19 really rear its ugly head. And then by April, my school district had sent all of us home and we were teaching remotely. So thus we entered the pandemic. And that summer, after being home for a considerable amount of time, my husband and I said, we really enjoy having our family time and being together. And at the rate we're going, we're probably not going to be able to purchase a home. We were renting at the time. We're probably not going to be able to purchase a home anytime soon. And when we do, it will take both of our incomes to make that house payment for 30 years. So, is there another way that we can have a home of our own, have our family spending quality time together without it being in the middle of a pandemic, and achieve some other goals that we had, one of which is to expose our daughter, who, gosh, at that time she would have been 9. Actually, she would have been younger than that. She would have been, because it was 2020 at that point. So she would have been 7. She would have been 7 years old, almost 8. Well, by the summer, she was 8. So we wanted her to have a different school experience, and we wanted her to have exposure to her Brazilian culture, be able to speak Portuguese fluently, but Brazil was not an option for us. So we started kind of looking at moving to Portugal. My husband is also Portuguese. He has Portuguese ancestry. So this is one of the ways that you can actually move to Portugal. If you have ancestry that you can trace back to, and I know Italy is another one of the countries, but Italy and Portugal, and I think there are some other European countries, you can, once you trace that back, you can hire an attorney to go through and get your citizenship if you have documents that trace that lineage back. And I'm not sure what the specifics are for each country. For my husband, his grandmother had to get hers, and she had paperwork showing that her father was Portuguese. I'm sorry, her grandfather. Her grandfather was Portuguese. So, and had come over. So she had all those documents. So she had to get her citizenship first. Then my husband's mother had to get her citizenship. And then my husband was eligible to get his. So that once he had his citizenship in Portugal, then he could bring his whole family over. Our daughter automatically qualified for citizenship as well. Hers is almost processed at this point. Mine is a lengthier process should I choose to go through it. But I essentially have a green card, just like we have in the United States, only it's because I'm married to a Portuguese citizen. So they recognize our marriage and that I can have residence without necessarily having citizenship. So this is one of many ways, and we'll have other guests come on and tell you some of the other ways that you can come here if you're thinking about doing this. But we started this process that summer, and we also contacted someone about building a house. And I am going to put links in today's show notes that tell you all the platforms you can find this information. And I am going to put a link in for my architect. Probably one of the, I'm going to tell you what our process was like. But one of the things that I think it's important to know is that it's going to sound like we did some things that were, well, they were a little bit trusting. However, we really researched the people that we were working for. So I want to warn anybody before I start this portion of the story that you should make sure you have a trustworthy point of contact. And one of the reasons that my friends and I are putting together the Path to Portugal is so that we can provide reliable content for people who are serious about doing this. And so that hopefully people can access our information and it will actually save them money in the long run. Because sometimes things happen here that are different than what we expect. And additionally, there are always people looking for opportunity to make a little extra cash, no matter what country you go to. And Portugal doesn't lack those people either. So we contacted an architect that we had already researched and had a Zoom meeting with him and asked him what he thought about us building a house. And we gave him our budget. And he said that that budget was workable. And we talked about what size property we needed. And we talked about some areas where we would be able to find property in that price zone. We had already looked at houses for sale in Portugal, and this again is a warning to the wise. What you see on the websites is not always what you get, but we knew enough at the houses we were looking at on websites that we were going to want to remodel. And our architect, for our specific needs and wants, suggested it would be cheaper or the same to just build what we want. So that's what we did. And so the first part of the process was finding properties. And he gave us kind of an area to look in. We found, I think originally it was 5 properties, and then we whittled it down to 3. And then he actually went and I'm sorry, I keep saying he, but it was he and his wife. Their names are Patricia and Vasco. And they're Portuguese, and their office is in Lisbon. And again, I'll put that in the show notes. But it basically, they go and visit the property. They know at that point kind of what the client wants, and then they decide whether or not they think that it's viable. So he gave us a recommendation on a property, and we made the choice to be very risky and go ahead and buy the property without seeing it. But we did have a lot of trust in Vasco, and we had been through the area where we purchased the property, even though we had not seen that specific property. We had to find a realtor. So we chose to go with, because we live in a little village, and we chose to go with a realtor from that village. And again, we researched him first, But he ended up being just wonderful. And I will put his information in the show notes as well because he has a pretty wide area that he works in. And he's just a really, really nice person. So we that started our house building project. Now that would have been 2020 was when we originally met with our architect. We purchased our property in the spring of 2021 and we thought that we would have a house ready to go. You know, we were going to actually try to move by 2021 that summer when school got out. We didn't think the house would be done, but we thought we'd be ready to move. And it turned out it was just a lot more complicated for a variety of reasons. A lot of it is paperwork. The paperwork gets finished when it gets finished, and we were still dealing with the pandemic. So we ended up having to stay another year, another school year. And in the summer of 2022, we decided that we were going to leave the United States. I needed to finish up my job. And my husband had taken a new job. So our intent was to go to Portugal, but we wanted to go visit his family in Brazil first. So, in order to do this move, we made the choice to sell everything, including our car. We found that it was most cost effective for us, and we had in savings, not including things for our house and, you know, those kinds of things, but we had a year's salary because we were concerned about what things would be like when we got here. And we knew that the paperwork was still, they hadn't even started on the house yet. So, since things were going so slowly, we decided that we would spend 6 months in Brazil. Before that, though, we sold everything. We put what we could. We have some things still stored with family, if I'm being honest. And every time we go back to the United States, we just make sure that we're allowed at least 2 suitcases per person, and we load those suitcases up. A lot of things like it was books, if I'm being honest, and I got rid of a ton of books, but I had some I just couldn't let go of. Pictures, you know, more memorabilia type things. But we whittled down all of our items to 2 big bags per person, 1 carry-on and 1 backpack. So we set out in the summer of 2022, and we decided that we were going to see some parts of Canada that we wanted to see that before we left because we were in the Pacific Northwest and we wanted to go up there. Plus, it was cheaper to fly out of Canada to Brazil. And so we were lugging, gosh, however much luggage that was, 2, 4, 6, 9 bags and 3 backpacks all over Canada. We did this thing called trustedhousesitters.com. We did a month in Canada. And Trusted House Sitters, I'm going to put a plug in for them, even though they don't pay me to do so. Trusted House Sitters is also a really good resource if you want to come visit some kind of rural areas in not just Portugal, but many European countries, and definitely in the United States if you want to go visit places. Basically, you pay a fee. The people that use the service also pay a fee, and part of that means you get a background check. Then you put in to either interview people to do house sitting for you, or or you put in that you're willing to do house sitting, which was us. So we did not pay for any accommodations while that month we were in Canada because we went and took care of people's houses for them. In our particular case, we did pet sitting. We really enjoyed pet sitting, and a lot of Trusted House Sitters patrons are looking for people to come and stay with their pets. So we had a really great experience. We even had one house sit that we did where they had a car for us. We were allowed to use their car the whole time. I told my husband, I mean, some of these houses we stayed in were nicer than any hotel we've ever stayed in. So if you are thinking of just really being adventurous and wanting to get out there and explore Portugal, some of those are here as well. I think a lot of times the accommodations are a little more rustic here, but and Spain has a variety of them too. But anyway, if you're into that kind of thing, that's how we stayed for our month in Canada. After Canada, we took all of our bags and we went to Brazil. For me, this was the most challenging part of the move. I probably went through the biggest cultural transition in Brazil, coming from the United States to a country that is a lot more, has a lot more violent crime, believe it or not, because there's just huge income disparities in Brazil. It's a beautiful, wonderful culture, but I did not speak Portuguese. I learned really quickly that I don't have a lot of street smarts when it comes to being there, and it was very, very hard for me. The language piece especially was hard for me. So the cultural values were different, not bad, just different from what I was used to. I found that most of the time I couldn't predict what was going to happen. And for my personality, that was really, really, really challenging. I felt very lonely. I felt very isolated. I definitely went through a depression. And I was more than ready to leave Brazil when we left. And it had nothing to do with the people I was with. I was with family. They were loving and wonderful to me. It was just, I really felt like that proverbial drinking water out of a fire hydrant. I could not keep up with all of the change. And so it was a challenge for me. So when our family just, and if you're curious about Camille's schooling situation, she would have been in 2022, she would have been 9. I homeschooled her while we were in Brazil. I'm a teacher, but I do not recommend doing this. I think, even in the pandemic, it was not fun. Definitely wasn't fun in Brazil when she was kind of going through her own cultural transition. It was too much for both of us. And I think that that would be one of the things that I hope in my own interview to get across is that all of this is hard and it's not a vacation. I had been to Brazil before and had had an amazing time, but living there for 6 months, it became my home. And it was not a home that I had a lot of independence in because of the cultural barriers and the language barrier. And that was very, very challenging. And, just a minor thing is that we couldn't go outside without other family members with us because there are so many people looking for, opportunity. So whether that is to steal my earrings or to sometimes even just take your shoes because anything you have is better than what they have. And I'm a target just by the fact that I speak English. So it was very hard for us, Camille and I both. So, but we made it through and we made it through stronger and we're definitely closer to our family for having done that. So that was nice. When we left Brazil, we came to Portugal. And I think that my cultural transition into Portugal was way easier for the simple fact that I had gone through the experience that I had gone through in Brazil. So once we got to Portugal, we got here in, it was 2023 by the time we got here. And we got here at the end of February. And we chose to stay at an Airbnb for a month while we looked for an apartment. So, one of the things that we were not aware of is that you can find apartments on, there's a really popular website, and I definitely encourage everyone to look at this website because it's a great idea to get It's a great way to get an idea of costs and what you get. But again, you need a point of contact and somebody in your corner working for you that understands the system. But the website is called Idealista. And in Portuguese, we say Idealista. But it looks like to English speakers, Idealista and .com, and I will put a link for that in the show notes. And it's just an apartment finder or house finder. It's a really great website. If you use Google Chrome, you can have everything translated to English so you can understand what it's saying. But when we got here, we had our list of apartments on Idealista, and we realized really quickly we needed help. And someone told us, yeah, you probably need to find a real estate agent. A realtor is what we would call them. They're called real estate agents here. And so Lucas has cousins all over the world, my husband. And his cousin actually lived in a town that was close by. It's like a fourth cousin twice removed, but they, somehow they're related. And so his mom had come over here with us, and she was bound and determined she was going to go see this relative of hers that was here. So when we went and visited them and we were telling them we were looking for an apartment, they said, "Oh, well, we know a real estate agent." So they put us in contact with someone. Um, I, yes. So he helped us find an apartment, and I still think I think that we overpaid a little bit for that first apartment. And it was a really nice new apartment, but it was a one bedroom, and it's all that was available in the building. But Lucas's cousin also lived there. And so it felt a little safer having someone that we knew close by. So we took it and we lived there for the first year and a half that we lived here. Second time around, we found his cousin actually bought an apartment, and we're renting his apartment now because you might be wondering, our house is still not done. Once we got here, we had some things to do for that though, and one was finding a contractor. And then we had to do the home loan process. And so our house is slated to be done in 2026. But it was really, that was kind of our rite of passage. We were very, very relieved that we got here with all of our bags and our goods. We did not regret not bringing our stuff for our particular move. It just didn't work for us. And we went to IKEA and we bought, everything that we needed. Although a lot of the apartments and houses that you would rent do come furnished here. So, yeah, that was kind of our process. So we got here in 2023. We've been here right at 2 years. And I would say our biggest reason for even wanting to do this, beyond that it was just possible for us to do it, is that as a US school teacher, I just didn't want to be in that system anymore, and I didn't want my child to be in it. I just want to throw that in as another big additional reason. And I do believe in the public school system, and I do think that it can work. However, I think that there are a lot of things working against it right now. And I don't feel that the last few years that I worked, that there was support from families. I don't think there's support for the US education system in politics. I mean, I'm really pulling for that system, that communities will start coming together and taking back their school systems, because it's not going anywhere good. And we needed to get out. So, yeah, it just seemed like this was a better fit for us. So the most challenging thing once we got here was getting Camille into school. And for sure, for Camille and I both, it was the language. But I do want to say, while we were in Brazil, we both picked up a lot. She picked up way more than I did. But when you have to sit and not talk, really. It kind of forces you to learn at least some phrases to get by. So when we got here, I had a few of these, but Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese are very, very different. So we I did not start out taking lessons at first. And a lot of it is because for me personally, I was just so overwhelmed with how different navigating everything was here. So I had gone through this cultural assimilation in Brazil, and a lot of it was around being afraid for my life. And I didn't have that here in Portugal, which meant now I needed to go to the grocery store. I could go to the mall. I could walk everywhere. However, I couldn't read signs and I couldn't understand the language. And I will say, I had so many people help me because I do know a little bit of Portuguese. So I could say, com licença, which is with license. And that basically means excuse me. And I would say, meu português es não bom. That is, my Portuguese is not good. And most of the time, people would say English. And I would say yes. And then they would speak English to me. Now I will tell them that I'm trying to practice. I take Portuguese lessons twice a week. I have most of my friends who have come here. If they hear me, they think I speak Portuguese. But really, I have a long, long way to go. I can understand about 75% of what I hear as long as the person doesn't have an accent. Because in Portugal, just like in the US, we have different accents and dialects depending on what area you're from. And some of them I just cannot understand. But if they speak slowly and clearly, I can understand about 75% of what is said. But this was my biggest hurdle. It continues to be my biggest hurdle. Google Translate saved my bacon more than once. And I would say this was Camille's biggest hurdle as well. We put her in a school that was all Portuguese for the end of the school year. We started her in April, I think, and she stayed in until the school year goes until the end of July here. And so she stayed until the end of July, and then she went and we had her repeat a grade because it was all in Portuguese. So she did not have other students in her class that were immigrants like she was. She had, they were all Portuguese. So she heard it all day long, and she was exhausted every day when she came home. I was exhausted for easily 6 months because it's just, like I said, everything is so different. It took me, I think, 2 weeks to find a sink scrubby brush because I just couldn't figure out where to go to buy one. And by the way, I ended up going to the China shop, but now I know other places to go. If you're looking for one, message me. I'll help you. But we have these China shops that are just exactly what they say. They are goods that are usually purchased and from and made in China. And they're just these huge stores that you just have to, they have everything under the sun and you have to look for hours to find it. And sometimes it's a good price and sometimes it's not. But when you got to have it, you got to have it. Yeah, but I mean, it was a lot of that for me. It was a lot of just stores didn't look like stores to me. So I would walk right by a place that I needed to go to, not realizing that it was a store. Um, it was a lot of me, doing things that culturally don't fit here. One of them is that I smile a lot. I just, as I'm walking, I walked everywhere. I was so happy to be in Portugal and be able to walk again by myself. So I'm just smiling at everyone. Well, if you smile at someone, they think that they know you on a personal level. So what I got back was puzzled looks like, how do I know this person that's just, beaming at me? I realized that I had kind of gotten into this habit of dressing really, really comfy. And one time I was walking through the park and they were building these little wooden structures. And I knew there was going to be an event at the park. And I wanted to ask someone if they knew what it was. And there was a woman walking by. And I said, Con licenza. And she just walked by and held her finger up in her hand. And I said, con licenza, signora. And she, mm, and come to find out, she thought that I was a beggar in the park. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that when you don't know the language and you don't know the culture, be prepared to bumble through those boundaries, not meaning to. I was not a hit at parties. I'm still not. Who am I kidding? But these are things that were challenging for me and also challenging for my daughter, Camille, because she had a challenging time making friends. The students in her class kind of monitor each other, and she was not used to a student coming over and giving her corrections on her paper, unsolicited. And she thought she was doing what she needed to. So it was better than Brazil, but it was a tough first year just kind of finding our way and where we belonged in this culture. And I think what most people do, I see it happen a lot in the groups that I encounter, is that they tend to find ways to travel. Like, okay, rather than dealing with all this cultural whatever, we're going to go and we're going to do this weekend. We're going to go visit this. And that does help a lot because at least you're like, okay, this is why I moved here. I wanted to be able to see Europe. I wanted to be able to see Portugal. But we weren't rich. That money we had in savings, it was going fast. And I wasn't working, and it was just a challenging first year. And not having friends is really hard. Making new friends, even the ones that could speak English, not all of us were from the US. And whether we want to believe it or not, there are cultural differences. And that can make friendship a little challenging at times. And it works a couple of weird ways. It works the way that I just said. We have different cultural values. And so sometimes you stomp all over each other's or you don't understand each other because of that, even if you're speaking the same language. The second thing that can happen is you are wanting someone to connect with. And so you find somebody who speaks your language, and all of a sudden you think you're better friends than actually what you are because you don't really know each other. You're just so relieved to have someone who speaks your language. So navigating those kinds of relationships can be a challenge, and everybody has to figure that out on their own. There are these huge social groups where everybody's, posting all over WhatsApp and Facebook. WhatsApp is the most common used app here to connect people. And some people are really into that. For me, I was looking for close personal connections with people who shared my values, and that was not the best forum for me to find that in. I found out kind of quickly. So that was hard. It was hard not having anyone. And I think the other part that I didn't anticipate was that it was equally hard to not have all my people from back home. They couldn't relate to what I was going through. So I was kind of stuck in this weird purgatory where I had nobody that I could really talk to about how challenging it was, that understood what I was going through, that I trusted. So, and that I felt like I could really be myself with. So that was really, really a big challenge for me. So I have my little questions here, and the next one is that question was what was most challenging, and I would definitely say that it is that and the language thing. But the next question is, how has living here been different than what I anticipated that it was going to be? And I think that, when you move to Europe, you anticipate, oh, well, I'm not going to speak for everybody else. I anticipated that it was going to be like the United States, except they speak another language. And in hindsight, I know how naive that sounds. Um, I definitely have learned some very valuable lessons on culture, my own and other cultures, because it's not just Portuguese culture that's here, right? We have a melting pot of cultures that are here. But I realized that language piece is so important to understanding the culture. Like you can't even get the jokes here if you don't know the language. And also their history. Knowing their history helps me understand the culture so much better. And I think that I was just, again, super naive. I romanticized what this move was going to look like, and I definitely simplified Portugal and its people. And for that, I apologize. Because in my mind, like I said, it was going to be pretty much like the United States, except they spoke Portuguese. And when I got here, I realized that it's so much more. And it was a lot of learning on my part. And I'm so thankful for these lessons. Um, I thought I was going to move here and it was a nation of grandmas and grandpas and everybody cherished children. And, you know, they were going to just be so happy to embrace us because Portugal is a country that doesn't have a lot of money and we're bringing money into the country by, you know, building a house here. And here's what, you know, I discovered is that Portugal has normal people just like any other country. And some of those people are nice and some are not. Um, and a lot of them don't really appreciate any of us coming here because we're outpricing houses so that the people who have lived here generation after generation after generation can't afford houses. So, you know, you have three generations of families living in a house because nobody can afford to move out. And yeah, I mean, it's every country has its stuff. And I think that I would give that advice as well. You need to know Portugal's stuff before you move here, not so that you won't be affected by it, but so you're aware of it and you can be sensitive to it. Um, yeah. So that was way different than what I anticipated. I did kind of think it was going to be vacation all day, every day, peace, love, and happiness. Um, I also didn't anticipate that it would take me such a long time to adjust to living a slower paced life. Like I thought, you know, oh, that'll be easy. I can totally get used to that. No, no, I could not. I'm very I'd been a teacher for 15 years. I was very much on a schedule. I'm going to tell you right now, Portugal, most times are suggested times. My daughter said last week on our way to school, I'm like, you got to hurry up. We're going to be late. And she said, Mom, nobody's ever late to school here. And sure enough, you know, it's 8:30. That's when class is supposed to start. And there's still tons of kids being dropped off. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you've heard about island time. Well, there's definitely Portugal time as well. So, um, I'm going to close up my little story of moving to Portugal with telling you what's been really good about living here now. So I've kind of given you some of the warnings and talked about, you know, the things I think you need to think about if you're thinking about making this move. But there are so many reasons that I'm glad that we did this. The Portuguese do value family. The swallow is their national bird. Well, actually, I think it's the rooster. But they had this very famous artist named Rafael Bordalo, and he created these swallows out of ceramic and painted them and did a big display in Lisbon of them. And now you'll see these little flocks of swallows all over Portugal. Really, they're these ceramic swallows. They sell them everywhere. They're not very expensive. But one of the reasons that the swallow was such a good symbol for Portugal is because swallows nest in the same area, in the same nest year after year. They have the same partner. Both parents help raise the kids, and it's a very family focused bird. And Rafael Bordalo recognized that this is Portugal as a country. It is not perfect, has all the problems that you're going to get in any other country. But boy, they are family focused people. These are people that try to have Sunday dinner still with their families on Sunday, preferably at grandma's house. They are not about spending big gobs of money because it's just not there. They are about spending time with each other and taking care of family. And they're also about taking care of community. And you do see that everywhere you go. I can't say enough for that. I would like to go on a long tangent about what things were like when I was young compared to what I felt like the United States was when I left. But I think that anybody listening is going to know they're probably feeling that already. Many times I have felt like I have been transported back to the 1970s since I have been here. And sometimes that's not a good thing. My Portuguese lessons, I'm going to tell you right now, some of the text is so sexist, I can't even believe it. But for the most part, people are kind and caring to each other, even people who don't like each other very much. And so my family and I have gotten our time back. I have become this person who doesn't do a lot of planning anymore. I just take the day as it comes. I Portugal gave me my life back. My stress level was way too high. And I have new stresses here, a lot of them around language. But it's not the same as when I was in the US. I'm just living day to day. And so I will close with my favorite thing that I see almost every time I'm on a walk, and I walk about at least an hour every day. I love to walk. Most places are very walkable here. My favorite thing is that usually there's all kinds of other people out walking as well. But I love to see these, I call them little old men, because the Portuguese are not tall, which is another reason I like them. I fit right in. I'm 5'2", and we're all about in that area, maybe give or take a few inches. But these little old men will be walking down the sidewalk, and they'll see one of their buddies either sitting at a cafe, or they'll see them across the street, and they'll yell at each other back and forth. And then one of them will come to the other one, and they give each other a big hug, and they kiss each other on the cheek. And then they'll walk for a bit with their arms around each other. And it's just something in that I was missing in my life in the United States. And if you're in the United States and you have that, that's amazing. We need more of that. So that is the first episode of Mover, Portugal Unpacked. I try to say mover with an accent because it is actually the Portuguese word for to move. So if you're English, you're probably reading it as mover, but I intended it to be to move, but it's not like to move from one country to another. It is to pick something up and move it someplace else. And so that's kind of what this podcast is about. Picking up your life and moving it to someplace else. It's more than just a move. Thanks for listening.
I hear destiny and it's calling. I'll keep my head up high through the downs and lows, and we're all going live. Still nobody knows, but I'ma choose what's right and take what comes and goes. And ain't no one in life holding me back no more.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is the song A Year Ago by Nefex. If you know someone contemplating a move or visit to Portugal, please share this podcast. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access it and sharing it with others you think would benefit from it. You can find Mover Portugal Unpacked on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and Buzzsprout at tot.buzzsprout.com. A final place you can access this podcast is on the Path to Portugal community located in the School platform. That's school, SKOOL.com. On this platform, you can also access Ask Rudy, a tool to answer your most complex and simple questions about relocating to another country. If you want to understand the move abroad process, simplify the steps for efficiency, and save money, ask Rudy. And for those of us wanting this to be part of a bigger life change, the Path to Portugal community also offers the Living Brave program. This is a program offering you the tools to move forward and align your life through brave action, as well as the community support and accountability you've been needing. All links to all platforms can be found in today's show notes and at totspot.com. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Just a gentle reminder, Mover Portugal Unpacked is for entertainment purposes only. It should not take the place of professional or legal advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own. They reflect nothing more than that. All experiences are expressed through the filter of the individual. And hey, this is Portugal. We can all have very different experiences doing the exact same thing here. So please, do your own research and discuss your options with qualified professionals before making this or any other decision. And a final note, any opinions or thoughts expressed during this podcast are not meant to malign any group or organization. This is Melissa Lefort. Thank you for unpacking today's portion of the Path to Portugal with me.
Way back a year ago,